Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
so welcome everyone to this Coffee and Learn session. Today we will be talking about learning analytics and collaboration processes. For this, we have very interesting people joining us today. They are Carmel Kent. She holds a PhD in learning analytics, online communities, and online learning by the University of Haifa. And she's currently a senior research fellow at University College London, as well as head of educational data science at UCL Educate. We also have Mutlu Cukurova. He holds a PhD in learning sciences by the University of York. And currently he's a lecturer in digital technologies and education at UCL. And also over there we have Abayomi Akanji. He holds a master's degree in education and technology at UCL. So over to you. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start then. Good afternoon to everyone in the EPFL community, and thank you so much for inviting us to take part in your Lunch and Learn or Coffee and Learn series and to share our research with you. My name is Carmel. My colleagues, as Mark said, are Mutlu and Abayomi, which you will be hearing from shortly as well. We have worked hard in the last few weeks to come up with some interactive session that will hopefully enable both you and us to open our minds and rethink together a bit about what kinds of learning analytics can be helpful and valid for online learning instructors in order to assess the collaboration that's taking place in online classes, which is to some extent very, very relevant today in the COVID situation. Anyway, the first part would be approximately, I hope, no more than 20 minutes, a short talk introducing our research and the CLAP framework that we want to show you and get your feedback about. And in the second part, we will hold a discussion in which we will be hoping to get your thinking in a live discussion in Zoom or using the chat box, whichever makes you feel more comfortable. And as Mark just reminded me, we want to record this session purely for research purposes, just so that we will have all your comments and contribution to the discussion when we think ahead about our research. So we have attached a consent form for the recording, and if anyone have any objection, please let us know. Okay, I will share my screen, if that's okay, to start with the first part, the presentation. Okay, so online discussions. Online discussion is a very effective tool to engage students in an asynchronous collaborative learning. This togetherness can enable a learning community to build a shared knowledge space, to build each student's understanding by making arguments and counter arguments, to be exposed to others' beliefs and opinions, and essentially to learn by using this resource of the community. Now, we all know as teachers and learners in online communities how online discussions look like, but how does an effective online discussion look like? And as teachers, how do we evaluate the effectiveness of the collaboration taking place in our class? in every moment of the discussion. So Moodle in these screenshots, but any other LMS usually offer us some reports on which tasks students were able to submit online or not, to complete. But specifically with respect to collaborative learning, when we try, for example, a new design in class for the discussion to get a better outcome, whichever the outcome we hope for, how do we know how the outcome or how the collaboration changes as a result of this change? Now, we all know this typical shape of online collaboration, if you will. The number of posts of an online community usually starts high and usually very soon dies out unless, of course, we attend it very carefully and adapt the learning design or the discussion design to the community. This is a screenshot from one of our programs. But the question that we want to pose today is, does counting posts or comments trustfully tell the story of collaboration? Or can we as social creatures can be so easily reduced to just the number of posts we put up on a discussion? So this was exactly the question we were concerned with when we started working on the CLAP framework. CLAP goes for collaboration as a process. So what is CLAP? CLAP is an evaluation framework for opening the black box of the collective process of collaboration in learning. Some specific thing to think about. First, we are very interested in evaluating the community as a whole, rather than evaluating the collaborative skills of each individual student. We want to get the image of what's going on in class. Second, we are interested in evaluating learning as a process rather than the outcome, which is of course a very formative point of view to learning. And third, we are trying to understand and evaluate the intricacies and the special nature of collaboration in learning, rather than the simpler construct of mere participation. So what can be seen, visualized, or gained even from on top of just who speaks out, who writes something on the discussion board? How do they really collaborate, not just who speaks? So the theory we were based on is one of the mostly used one in the learning sciences, which is the cognitive load theory. So when learning by the cognitive load theory, which tries to explain learning, we consume new information through our senses. This information is processed in our most limited resources, which is the working memory. And then we use that with our maybe most precious resource, which is our long-term memory. We use the existing structures that we have in the long-term memory, or existing schemas, in order to relate the newly processed information to what we already know. So the cognitive load in the cognitive load theory refers to the total working memory resources that are required by an individual learner to carry out a learning task. So we put for ourselves some kind of a working definition for what is a meaningful learning interaction of an individual learner, which is the act of relating newly introduced information to existing knowledge structures. It's not a new definition. It's just the definition that we will be using. and specifically it posits the importance of three things. So first, the learner's opportunity to be exposed to new concept, to new information, to new observation that they pick up from the environment. Second, the importance of solid schemas of existing knowledge in the long-term memory. And third is learning designs that reflects on the connection, the relationship, how we connect this newly consumed information with the existing long-term memory schemas. Now, when we take this individual learning concept of what is a meaningful interaction and use it in a dialogue, so from a cognitive load theory perspective, dialogue and collaboration in general is seen as a shared working memory resource shared by the whole group, by the whole collective. In the paper that we put here on the bottom side of the slide, Sweller, and Zambrano introduced the concept of collaborative cognitive load theory, which stress that most of the information we acquire is coming from long-term memories of other people. So it's actually borrowed from other people long-term memories. And specifically the collaborative cognitive load theory looks at collaborative learning as availing a group resource of everyone's memory, working memory or long-term memory, availing to the individual learning. So for the purpose of individual learning. And so the main effect of collaboration on the individual learning is mainly achieved by essentially affording more resources, because we have the whole group's cognitions to use in that sense. And the effectiveness of collaborations when looking from the collaborative cognitive load theory is measured by the performance of individuals. Now, this is exactly what we would like to challenge here, that we want to challenge the view of the CCLT, the collaborative cognitive load theory, of assessing collaborative learning by the cognitive load of each of the learners. Now, there is good evidence showing that collective intelligence, collective cognition, is not a linear aggregation of its individual cognitions, of the individual cognitive system taking part of this group. And that the cognition, if we can call the cognition of a group, cognition of this entity of a group, has its own properties, which stems from the dynamics of interaction between people in the group. So we thought that it might not make a lot of sense to measure collaboration from the point of view of aggregating individual cognitive loads. And maybe even just because that there are at least two properties of the groups that we will be discussing shortly, two properties of groups that directly relate to group cognition and group dialogue and not to the individuals. So these two properties are, one of them is what we call costs of coordination. So it's the general cognitive costs of coordination, of the coordination processes that needs to take place when we work together. So we need to try and understand other people. We need to try and understand interaction between each other and the dynamics of communication that is taking place. So these costs of coordination will burden our collective cognition. On the other hand, on the right side of the slide, we gain so much from the interactivity. We gain so much from the responsiveness, from the knowledge that is built one on top of the other. So clearly, interactivity is another group property, but unlike the coordination costs, which very, in a very simplified way, we attributed to costs, interactivity actually adds up to our group cognition. So if we could look at the group of the entity that thinks and learns, then the interactivity is a property that adds that learning. So this is why it made sense to us to use networks when evaluating collaborative learning. So networks are one of the data structures that best holds or express the complexity of these interrelationships and group interaction. And this leads us to a working definition of meaningful learning interaction that I mentioned earlier, to what is collaborative learning. So we think of collaborative learning as the process of establishment and growth of network of interactions. So many interactions. I put a post, Mark reads the post, he has a new idea, so he put another post, and then Mutlu would read both their posts and maybe would integrate them into one new idea, so that we have a network of interaction that is growing among learning and knowledge artifacts. And this network will actually serve as the shared cognitive resource that we use as a group. So this network is the network that we are interested in evaluating. And this is the network which will serve us as this shared cognitive resource. So what we actually suggest is that the analysis of collaboration in learning should evaluate the gap offered between these two group properties. So what we gain from the interactivity minus what we lose by when we are coordinating. And so this simplified index is, so obviously the larger it is, the collective learning would be more collaborative because we gain more from the interactivity and maybe lose less by coordinating. Few things to mention that we were based on, or some assumption that we had. So first, this is assessing the learning as a process rather than an effect that employs a black box approach that makes it difficult to explain, mainly because we can break up this index of clap and look. And so if the clap index is going up, then we can look of whether it went up because we have more interactivity gain or because we have less coordination cost, and the other way around. The other thing to note is that the unit of analysis is the whole group. And we use network analysis, social network analysis, because of this bimodal network of interactions between people and artifacts, posts essentially, because it was a good proxy of the network of collaborative learning. Another thing to note is that it's a general metric. Since we are using network analysis and we are not using any kind of content analysis, and we are not dependent on any kind of knowledge domain, rubrics or anything like that, it's a general purpose framework. It will work the same for any instructional design, any class size, and any knowledge domain, which of course will affect or will make the interactivity and coordination go up and down, but the measurement can be done just as well. So just before we move on to the discussion and to talk about what we can do with this CLAP framework of evaluating the collaboration, just please meet these two real online learning communities in higher education, both instructed by the same instructor on the same subject, where, well, at least at the start of the term, they started with the same discussion design. You will see later what happened when they went forward. The design was essentially about posting, discussing, and relating a specific set of concepts that is related to their curriculum. And now Community 1 has 42 students with an overall of 253 posts. Community 2, just 32 students with an overall of 408 posts and more than twice the amount of interactions than Community 1. So when we say interactions, it's all kind of online interaction. It's views, it's voting, it's following, responding, whatever. So what is the story that we can learn from this high level statistics? When we add this view, so here you can see the week by week networks of interactions between the students, and you can also see the instructor, where in Community 1, he's very, very well emphasized in the middle of the network, less so in Community 2. And the orange interactions are what we call consumption, which are essentially views. The green one are contribution and updates of posts. And I will not mention the blue one, just for the sake of clarity of this discussion for now. So what is the story that is told here now, then when we see a week by week process and growth of this network of interactions? So clearly we see a much slower start of Community 1. It starts very, very, very sparsely. Second, it stays much more, even though there are the number of students is larger, it is much more sparse all the way through. Sorry. And probably the third thing that is very obvious from this visualization is that the upper row, the networks of Community 1 is much more orange than Community 2. So their interaction is very quiet. They view much more than they speak or contribute in relation to Community 2. So that's the kind of story that we can see here. Now, if we are looking at those networks and we are trying to operationalize interactivity gains and coordination costs and the gap between them, how do we do that using those networks of interactions? So in the paper, we suggested a list of few measures that could operationalize interactivity gain, and we also suggested a few to operationalize coordination costs. It is not in any way an exhaustive list. The literature of network analysis can add much more. It's just a few examples, and here I gave just two pretty simple examples. So on the left side, how do we measure, for example, interactivity gains? So interactivity gains would be those structural features of the network that support a very efficient flow of information, very egalitarian, that expose learner and connect new information to existing knowledge. So for example, we chose reciprocity of interaction, which indicates the level of mutuality. So how much do we actually not necessarily respond by commenting, but interact with people that are interacting with us. So as you can see from the image here, you can see that most of the people are interacting back with some other learner there that has viewed their content or responded to it or voted to it or whatever. So that would be one measure, that the measurement of reciprocity or mutuality would be one suggested measure for interactivity gains. On the other side, we want to measure coordination costs, which are the structure. So we are looking for the structural features that prevent an efficient, fast, very effective flow of information, because that would lead to high coordination costs. So one option is the variance in degree. So how heterogeneous the network is in terms of how much connection each of the learner has with other people. And the more heterogeneous they are, it would be harder to control and coordinate. So just as an example, in this sketch here, you can see one person in the middle that his or her degree is very high. She's connected to everyone, but the degree of the other people is very low because each and every one of them connect just to her. So this is an example, unlike the one on the left side, that is very heterogeneous. The variance in the degree is very high because she has a very high degree and they have a very low degree, and she's some kind of a bottleneck. It would be very hard to control, to coordinate such a network, much harder than the one on the left side.